I was halfway to the office when I realized my security badge was sitting on my nightstand. At 72 years old, you'd think I'd have my morning routine down perfectly, but some days your mind just wanders. I'd been CEO of Sentinel Risk Solutions for 34 years, and that little plastic card was the only thing standing between me and a very important board meeting. Turn around, I muttered to myself, checking the dashboard clock. 9:47 a.m. If I hurried, I could grab the badge and still make it back downtown by 10:30. The house was quiet when I pulled into our circular driveway. Vernon's Mercedes was there, which surprised me. He'd said something about golf with his Tuesday group, hadn't he? But then again, my husband of 37 years had been coming and going on his own schedule for as long as I could remember. I'd been too busy building my company to worry much about it. I kicked off my heels at the door, a habit Mama had drilled into me as a child, and padded across the marble foyer in my stockings. The house we'd bought 15 years ago was bigger than we needed, but Vernon had insisted. "A CEO needs to look successful," he'd said. "Image matters." That's when I heard his voice drifting down from the second floor. Vernon was on the phone, his tone sharp and businesslike. Nothing unusual about that. He managed our investments, handled our properties, took care of what he called the family portfolio. I grabbed the banister to head upstairs. "No, listen to me carefully," Vernon was saying. "The mother has to sign, not Corinne. The old lady doesn't trust banks anymore, remember? That's our way in." I froze with one foot on the bottom step. The old lady. That's what he called my mother? Octavia Reynolds had just turned 96, still sharp as a tack, still living in the same Harlem brownstone where she'd raised me and my brother. The brownstone our father had bought in 1961 for $18,000, now worth over $4 million. "I've been laying the groundwork for 3 years," Vernon continued. I could hear him pacing in our bedroom, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. "Corinne's too busy with that company to notice. She barely visits her mother anymore. It's perfect timing." My heart started pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. I pressed myself against the wall, hidden by the curve of the staircase. "The reverse mortgage paperwork is ready," Vernon said. "Once Octavia signs, the money gets deposited into the account I set up. By the time anyone realizes what happened, we'll be gone. Malta doesn't have an extradition treaty, remember?" My knees went weak. I gripped the banister to keep from collapsing. "What about Corinne?" a tinny voice asked through the phone speaker. A woman's voice. Young. Vernon laughed. Actually laughed. "Corinne? She's been a means to an end since day one. You think I spent 37 years with that woman for love? I was 25 when my mentor set this up. Find a lonely woman with assets, he said. Play the long game. And look, I'm about to cash in on a $4 million property plus whatever I can drain from her business accounts before I disappear." The floor tilted beneath me. I reached out, grabbing the console table to steady myself. A picture frame rattled, our wedding photo from 1988. 25-year-old me in my mother's vintage lace dress, beaming up at 25-year-old Vernon in his rented tuxedo. The man who'd shown up at Daddy's funeral, offering condolences. The man who'd courted me for 2 years before I finally said yes. The man who'd held my hand through every business struggle, every late night, every triumph. The man who'd been playing me for 37 years. Before we continue, please tell us where you're watching from so we know how far our stories reach, and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. "There's a problem, though," the woman on the phone said. "What if the daughter gets suspicious? She's smart. She built a whole security company." "Corinne?" Vernon scoffed. "She's so buried in her work she couldn't spot a con if it was wearing a neon sign. Besides, I've been managing her mother's affairs for years. I'm the one who drove Octavia to all her doctor appointments when Corinne was too busy. I'm the one who helped her with her bills when she got confused. Trust me, that old woman thinks I'm the best thing that ever happened to her daughter." Tears burned hot behind my eyes, but I blinked them back. Not now. I couldn't afford to break down now. "When do we make the move?" the woman asked. "Next week. I've got Octavia convinced she needs the money for home repairs. The roof, the furnace, all of it. She doesn't know a reverse mortgage means signing over her house. She thinks it's just a loan. By the time the truth comes out, we'll be sipping cocktails in Valletta." "And you're sure about the wife? She won't come after us?" Vernon's laugh was cold, cruel. "Corinne spent her whole life trying to prove she was good enough. Good enough daughter, good enough businesswoman, good enough wife. She won't admit she was fooled. The shame will keep her quiet. Besides, what's she going to do? She's a 72-year-old woman. By the time she processes what happened, we'll be untouchable." Something inside me cracked. Not broke, cracked. Like a dam developing its first fracture before the flood. I'd built Sentinel Risk Solutions from nothing. After Daddy died of a heart attack when I was 35, leaving Mama with just that brownstone and his city pension, I'd taken every dollar of my savings and started a security consulting firm. I'd spent decades teaching corporations how to identify threats, how to spot con artists, how to protect their assets from people exactly like Vernon. And I'd been sleeping next to one for 37 years. I crept backward, away from the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. My hand brushed against the antique side table, and I had to catch a crystal vase before it toppled. I held my breath, but Vernon kept talking upstairs, his voice dripping with contempt for the woman he'd promised to love, honor, and cherish. The woman he'd married as part of a long con. I made it to the front door, slipped my heels back on with shaking hands, and walked out as quietly as I'd entered. My company badge could wait. Everything could wait. Because Vernon had made one critical mistake in his 37-year scheme. He'd underestimated exactly how good I was at what I did. My phone was in my hand before I reached the car. I knew people. Investigators, lawyers, forensic accountants. I'd built a career on spotting fraud and protecting assets. I'd just never thought to look for it in my own home. As I drove away from the mansion Vernon had insisted we buy with my money, managed through accounts he controlled, my mind was already working. Not in grief, not in shock, but in the cold, calculated way I'd learned from 34 years of running a security firm. Vernon wanted to play games? Fine. He'd just activated a player he couldn't possibly beat. But first, I had to protect Mama, and I had to do it without tipping my hand. Because if Vernon suspected I knew, he might accelerate his timeline. He might hurt Mama to cover his tracks. He might disappear before I could prove what he'd done. I pulled over 3 blocks from the house, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Through the windshield, the morning sun glinted off the high rises of downtown Atlanta, the city I'd built my empire in, the city where I'd been named Businesswoman of the Year 3 times. The city where my company's reputation was spotless. But none of that mattered if I couldn't save my mother from the man I'd brought into our lives. I pulled out my phone and called my executive assistant. "Teresa, clear my schedule for the next 2 weeks. Family emergency. And get me Harold Winters on the phone." Harold was the best forensic accountant in the Southeast. He'd helped me crack a major embezzlement case 5 years ago. "Tell him I need him to look into something personal, and tell him I need absolute discretion." "Of course, Ms. Reynolds. Is everything all right?" "It will be," I said, watching a young couple walk past my car, holding hands and laughing. Had Vernon and I ever been like that? Or had it all been an act? "It will be." I ended the call and sat there for a moment, letting the truth wash over me. 37 years. 37 years of my life, given to a man who saw me as nothing more than a mark. 37 years of trust, of partnership, of building a life together. All of it a lie. But here's what Vernon didn't know. I'd spent 34 years teaching people how to fight back against predators, how to gather evidence, how to build an airtight case, how to strike when your enemy thought they'd already won. And I was very, very good at my job. My phone buzzed. A text from Vernon. "Where are you? Your car's gone." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could confront him, scream, demand answers. Let the rage that was building in my chest explode into his smug face. But that's not how you catch a con artist. You let them think they're winning. You let them get comfortable. You let them make mistakes. Forgot something at the office, I texted back. Home by dinner. 3 little dots appeared as he typed his response. Okay, love you. Love you. I stared at those words, feeling nothing but a cold, burning fury. Love you too, I typed back. Then I put the car in drive and headed toward my office, where I kept files on every dirty trick, every con game, every fraud scheme I'd encountered in 3 decades. Somewhere in those files was the blueprint for taking down a man like Vernon, and this time it was personal. What Vernon was about to learn was that you don't con a woman who's made her fortune teaching people how to spot cons. You especially don't con a black woman who's fought her whole life to build something from nothing, who's protected her family's legacy with everything she had. Because when you come for a woman like that, when you threaten her mother's home, the only piece of her father she has left, you don't just lose, you get destroyed. And I was going to enjoy every single minute of watching it happen. Harold Winters arrived at my office within 2 hours. He was a short, round man with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of quiet intensity that made fraudsters nervous. I'd watched him dismantle a CFO's embezzlement scheme so thoroughly that the man had confessed just to make Harold stop talking. "Corinne," he said, settling into the leather chair across from my desk. "Teresa said this was urgent and personal." I slid a folder across the desk. Inside was everything I'd pulled together in the past 90 minutes. Marriage certificate, joint bank statements, property deeds, investment accounts. 37 years of financial entanglement with a man I no longer knew. "I need you to follow the money," I said. "Every account my husband has touched, every investment he's managed, every property deal he's been part of. I want to know where every single dollar has gone." Harold opened the folder, his practiced eyes scanning the documents. "What am I looking for?" "Theft, fraud, a long con." I leaned back in my chair, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "This morning I overheard my husband on the phone. He's planning to steal my mother's brownstone through a fraudulent reverse mortgage, and he said something that's been eating at me. He called our marriage a 37-year setup." Harold's eyebrows shot up. "That's ambitious and cruel." "That's Vernon." I opened my laptop. "I've been thinking about it all morning. If this was really planned from the beginning, there have to be signs. Money disappearing, accounts I don't know about. Something." "When do you think it started?" 1986? The year felt like acid on my tongue. We met at my father's funeral. Daddy died of a massive heart attack at 58. Vernon showed up with the funeral director, said he was a family friend, though I'd never heard Daddy mention him. He was charming, attentive, patient with my grief. 2 years later, we were married. Harold was already taking notes. "So he targeted you when you were vulnerable." "When I had something worth taking." I pulled up a file on my screen. Daddy left Mama the brownstone free and clear. At the time, it was worth maybe $40,000. But even then, Harlem was starting to gentrify. Someone with vision could see what it would be worth eventually. And now? 4.2 million, according to the last assessment. I felt my jaw tighten. Vernon's been managing Mama's finances for 15 years. Since she turned 81 and started getting a little forgetful with bills, I thought he was helping, being a good son-in-law. He was positioning himself. Harold closed the folder. "Corinne, if what you heard is true, this is one of the most elaborate cons I've encountered. 37 years is a long time to maintain a false identity. Unless it's not false." I opened another file. "That's what's been bothering me. Vernon Lawrence Hodges. That's the name on our marriage certificate. But what if it's not his real name? What if everything about him is constructed?" Harold's expression sharpened. "You want me to run a background check?" "Deep background, the kind that costs extra." I met his eyes. I want to know who my husband really is, where he came from, if Vernon Lawrence Hodges even existed before 1986. That kind of investigation takes time. Then we'd better start now. I stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, Atlanta hummed with afternoon traffic. Somewhere in this city, Vernon was probably having lunch, laughing with friends, playing the role of devoted husband. He mentioned a mentor on the phone, someone who taught him how to run long cons. I need to know who that was, and I need to know if there are other victims. Harold was quiet for a moment. Other victims? I turned to face him. If Vernon's been running cons for 37 years, I'm probably not his first mark. There could be other women, other families he's destroyed. That's a sobering thought. It's a useful thought. I returned to my desk. If we can find other victims, we can establish a pattern, build a stronger case, maybe even find someone willing to testify. You're thinking criminal charges. I'm thinking complete destruction. The words came out harder than I intended. Vernon threatened my mother, the only parent I have left, the woman who sacrificed everything to raise me right, to send me to college, to give me opportunities she never had. That brownstone isn't just property, Harold. It's my father's legacy. It's where I learned to ride a bike, where I had my first kiss on the front stoop, where Mama held me when Daddy died. My voice cracked, but I pushed through. Vernon wants to take that from her. From us. To fund some fantasy life in Malta with his girlfriend. There's a girlfriend? Young, from the sound of her voice. I pulled up the notes I'd been making. She called him during the conversation. They've been planning this together. I need her identity, too. Harold stood up, tucking his folder under his arm. I'll start with the financial records. Bank statements, investment accounts, credit cards, everything. If money's been moving, I'll find it. The background check will take longer, but I have contacts who specialize in deep identity work. How long? For the financials? 3 days. For the background? Could be a week, maybe 2 if he's buried things well. 2 weeks. Vernon had said next week for the reverse mortgage signing. We don't have 2 weeks. He's moving on Mama next week. Then we prioritize. Harold headed for the door, then paused. Corinne, I have to ask. Are you going to be all right? Going home to him every night, pretending nothing's wrong? I thought about that. About sitting across the dinner table from Vernon, making small talk, smiling at his jokes. About lying next to him in bed, feeling his warmth, knowing it was all performance. I've been pretending for 37 years, I said quietly. I just didn't know it. What's a few more days? After Harold left, I made 3 more calls. First to Amani Fletcher, a private investigator I'd worked with on corporate cases, former Atlanta PD, now running her own firm. She specialized in surveillance and had a talent for being invisible. I need you to follow someone, I told her, 24/7 for the next week. I need to know everywhere he goes, everyone he meets, everything he does. Who's the target? I hesitated. My husband. There was a pause. Then, I'll start tonight. Second call was to my attorney, Phyllis Garrett. We'd known each other since law school in the 70s, back when black women in law were rare enough that we'd formed an instant bond. Phyllis, I need to divorce-proof my assets, immediately, and I need to know my options for pressing criminal charges in a fraud case. How bad is it? 37-year con bad. I'll explain in person. Can you come by tomorrow? I'll be there at 8. The third call was the hardest. I dialed Mama's number, my heart in my throat. Hello? Her voice was strong, clear. 96 years old and still sounded like she could run the world. Hey, Mama, it's me. Corinne, baby, I wasn't expecting you to call in the middle of the day. Everything all right? I closed my eyes. Everything's fine. I wanted to hear your voice. Well, that's sweet. I could hear her smile through the phone. Vernon was just here this morning, actually. Brought me groceries and helped me sort through some papers. That man of yours is a blessing, you know that? My stomach turned. What kind of papers, Mama? Oh, just some financial things. He says I need to think about fixing the roof before winter. Says there's a loan program for seniors that would help. He's going to bring the paperwork by next week for me to look at. The reverse mortgage. He was already setting the trap. Mama, don't sign anything without me seeing it first, okay? I know Vernon's helpful, but I want to review any financial papers before you commit to anything. Honey, you're so busy. I don't want to bother you with... You're never a bother. I forced warmth into my voice, even as rage burned in my chest. Please, Mama, humor me. Let me look at anything before you sign, all right? Well, if it'll make you feel better. It will. I love you, Mama. Love you too, baby. You coming by for Sunday dinner? Wouldn't miss it. I hung up and sat in the silence of my office, surrounded by awards and certificates and photos of me shaking hands with mayors and governors. Evidence of a successful life. Evidence of a woman who had it all figured out. What a joke. My phone buzzed. A text from Vernon. What do you want for dinner? I'm thinking about making that chicken thing you like. The chicken thing I liked. After 37 years, he knew I loved his honey garlic chicken. He knew I took my coffee with cream and 2 sugars. He knew I liked to read in bed before sleeping, that I hated action movies, that thunderstorms made me anxious. Or did he? Had he actually learned those things about me, or had he just memorized them? Filed them away as useful information for maintaining his cover? Chicken sounds perfect, I texted back. Be home by 7. I spent the rest of the afternoon pulling files from my company's archives. Every fraud case I'd worked, every con artist we'd helped catch, every manipulation tactic we'd documented. I was looking for patterns, for strategies, for ways to beat Vernon at his own game. Around 5 o'clock, Teresa knocked on my door. Ms. Reynolds, you've been in here for hours. Can I get you anything? I looked up from my laptop, realizing my eyes were burning from staring at screens. Actually, yes. I need you to pull every employee file we have on background checks, every investigation we've done into false identities, and I need our standard surveillance contract template. Is this for the new Johnson case? No. I met her concerned gaze. Teresa had been with me for 20 years. She'd earned my trust 1,000 times over. It's personal. And Teresa? Not a word to anyone. Especially not Vernon if he calls. Her expression shifted to understanding. Of course. Whatever you need. After she left, my phone rang. Harold. That was fast, I said. You need to sit down for this. His voice was grim. I'm sitting. I started with the joint accounts. Corinne, there's money missing. A lot of money. Over the past 5 years, there have been regular transfers from your business operating account to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Small amounts. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. Spread out enough that they wouldn't trigger alerts. My blood ran cold. How much total? So far, I've found about $800,000, and I'm only 3 years deep into the records. $800,000. Gone. Stolen from my company while I'd been busy running it, trusting my husband to handle our finances. There's more, Harold continued. The investment accounts Vernon's been managing? Most of them are performing far below market average. It looks like he's been skimming returns, reporting losses that never actually happened. How much more? Conservatively? Another $1.5 million over the course of your marriage. $2.3 million. That's what 37 years of trust had cost me. Can you prove it? My voice sounded distant, mechanical. With time, yes. The paper trail is there. He's been careful, but not careful enough. Whoever taught him this taught him well. But they taught him in an era before digital forensics got this sophisticated. Keep digging. I want every penny accounted for. Corinne, there's something else. The Cayman account? It's not in Vernon's name. It's registered to a corporation called VLH Investments. VLH. Vernon Lawrence Hodges. Maybe. Or maybe someone else entirely. I'm working on piercing the corporate veil, but these offshore setups are designed to hide ownership. It's going to take some time. After we hung up, I sat in my office as the sun set over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, beautiful and violent, like a wound. I thought about going home, about facing Vernon across the dinner table, about pretending I didn't know he'd stolen nearly $2.5 million from me, that he was planning to steal my mother's home, that our entire marriage was a lie constructed by a con artist and his young girlfriend. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Imani, the private investigator. "I'm on him," she said without preamble. "He left your house at 3 p.m., drove to a coffee shop in Buckhead, met with a woman, white, late 20s, blonde, very cozy, lots of hand-holding. They were there for 90 minutes, then went to a hotel. He's still there." The girlfriend, real and tangible, not just a voice on a phone. "Send me photos," I said. "Already in your email." I opened my laptop, and there they were. Vernon, my husband of 37 years, walking hand in hand with a woman young enough to be his granddaughter. Vernon kissing her in the hotel parking lot. Vernon looking at her the way he'd once looked at me, or pretended to look at me all those years ago. The last photo was a close-up of the woman's face. Pretty, in a generic sort of way. Blonde hair, bright smile, expensive clothes. She looked happy, triumphant even. She had no idea what was coming. Neither did Vernon. I gathered my things and headed home, rehearsing my performance. Surprised to see him. Happy about the chicken. Tired from work. Normal. Everything normal. Because that's what you do when you're hunting a predator. You make them think they're safe. You make them believe they've won. And then, when they're most comfortable, most confident, you spring the trap. Vernon was in the kitchen when I arrived, apron on, humming along to old Motown on the radio. The Temptations. My Girl, our wedding song. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, pulling me in for a kiss. His lips on mine felt like betrayal made flesh. "How was your day?" I smiled at him, thinking about the photos on my phone, about the $800,000 he'd stolen, about the plan to take my mother's home, about 37 years of lies. "Just another day," I said. "You know how it is." "I do." He turned back to the stove, stirring something that smelled delicious. "You work too hard, you know that? You should think about retiring. We could travel, see the world. Malta's supposed to be beautiful this time of year." Malta. I sat down at the kitchen island watching him cook, this man I'd trusted with everything. "That sounds nice," I said. "Maybe we should." And as Vernon served dinner, pouring wine and chatting about his day, carefully editing out the 90 minutes with his girlfriend, no doubt, I smiled and nodded and played my part. Because in 2 weeks, Vernon Lawrence Hodges was going to learn what happens when you con a woman who's forgotten more about fraud than he'd ever know. And I was going to make sure he never forgot the lesson. The next week was the longest of my life. Every morning I woke up next to Vernon, watching him sleep, wondering who he really was. Every evening I came home to his kisses and his cooking and his carefully constructed performance of devoted husband. And every day, my team built the case that would destroy him. Harold worked around the clock. By Wednesday, he'd traced the missing money back 12 years and found over $3 million stolen from various accounts. But more importantly, he'd found the mentor. "His name is Clement Briggs," Harold told me over the phone. 78 years old, currently serving 15 years in federal prison for running a romance scam ring in the 90s. Before that, he specialized in training young men to target wealthy widows and divorcees. Vernon was one of his students. "Can you prove it?" "Better." I found 2 other women. Vernon's not even his real name. It's Daryl Eugene Watts. He married a woman named Lucinda Chen in 1979 under the name Victor Hayes. Drained her inheritance over 6 years, then disappeared. Did the same thing to a woman named Beatrice Okonkwo from 1980 to 1985 under the name Vincent Chambers. Both women reported the fraud, but by the time authorities investigated, he was gone. New name, new identity, new victim. Me. I was the new victim. Except I wasn't going to stay a victim. Are they willing to testify? Lucinda died in 2003. But Beatrice? She's alive and angry. Lives in Chicago now. Says she'll testify if it means finally getting justice. Set it up. I want to meet her. Imani's surveillance revealed more. Vernon met with his girlfriend, whose name turned out to be Shayla Kingston, 4 times that week. They'd rented an apartment in Midtown under a false name, paid in cash. Imani had photographed documents spread across their kitchen table, the reverse mortgage paperwork, bank account information, and 2 one-way tickets to Malta dated for the following Tuesday. Phyllis worked her legal magic. She'd frozen my business accounts that Vernon had access to, quietly shifted assets into protected trusts, and prepared both divorce papers and a criminal complaint. She'd also contacted the FBI's fraud division and the Georgia Attorney General's office. Everyone was ready to move. The key is catching him in the act, Phyllis explained during one of our late-night strategy sessions. We have evidence of past theft, but if we can get him attempting the reverse mortgage fraud on tape with witnesses, it becomes undeniable. So we let him think it's working, I said. Let him bring Mama the papers. Let him guide her toward signing. And we stop him at the last second. Phyllis looked concerned. Your mother needs to be prepared, Corinne. This is going to be traumatic for her. I'd been dreading this conversation. But on Thursday evening, I drove to Harlem alone. Mama was in her kitchen making sweet potato pie, the whole brownstone smelling like cinnamon and memories. Mama, we need to talk. She took one look at my face and put down her mixing bowl. What's wrong, baby? I told her everything. About the phone call, about Vernon's real identity, about the 37 years of lies. I watched my mother's face crumble as the truth hit her, watched her grab the kitchen counter to steady herself. That man, she whispered. That man sat at my table. He called me Mama Octavia. He drove me to church every Sunday when my hip was bad. I know. He was going to steal my home, your daddy's home. He was going to try. I took her hands in mine. But we're going to stop him. I need your help, Mama. I need you to be strong for just a little bit longer. She looked at me with those fierce eyes that had gotten her through segregation, through widowhood, through raising 2 children on a postal worker's pension. Tell me what to do. On Friday, Vernon reminded me about Sunday dinner at Mama's house. She's so excited, he said, and I told her we'd help her look over those home repair papers afterward. You know how confused she gets with financial stuff. Of course, I said, my smile never wavering. Whatever she needs. Sunday morning, I woke up early. In a few hours, this would all be over. Vernon would be exposed, arrested, removed from my life forever. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. 37 years. More than half my life, given to a ghost. At Mama's house, the trap was set. Phyllis was upstairs with 2 FBI agents and a Georgia State investigator. Imani had cameras hidden throughout the first floor. Harold was monitoring from a van outside. And Mama, God bless her, was playing her part perfectly. Sweet, a little confused, eager to trust the son-in-law she thought she knew. Dinner was pot roast with all the trimmings. Vernon ate heartily, charming as ever, telling stories that made Mama laugh. I pushed food around my plate and watched him perform. After dessert, Vernon pulled out his briefcase. Miss Octavia, why don't we look at those papers I mentioned? For the roof repairs. Oh, yes, Mama said right on cue. Corinne, baby, Vernon's been so helpful. Did you know the whole roof needs replacing? Could cost $40,000. That's a lot of money, Mama. But Vernon found this wonderful loan program. It's perfect for seniors. He spread the papers across the dining table. See here, Miss Octavia? This is a special program that gives you the money for repairs, and you don't have to make any payments. It's all backed by the house value. That sounds too good to be true, I said carefully. It's legitimate, Vernon assured me, not even looking my way. His focus was entirely on Mama. I've helped several elderly clients set these up through my investment firm. It's called a reverse mortgage. Very common, very safe. Reverse mortgage? Mama frowned, exactly as we'd rehearsed. I thought you said it was just a loan. It is a loan. That's what a reverse mortgage is. Vernon's voice had that patient, slightly condescending tone he probably used on all his marks. You sign here, and the money gets deposited into this account for the repairs. What account? I asked. For the first time, Vernon showed a flash of irritation. The repair escrow account. I set it up to make sure the money is used properly. An account in whose name? It's a joint account, for protection. Joint between who? Between your mother and the management company. He was sweating now, just a little. Corinne? Why are you making this complicated? I'm trying to help your mother. Are you? I stood up, pulled out my phone, and pressed play on the audio file I'd saved. Vernon's voice filled the room, crystal clear. I've been laying the groundwork for 3 years. Corinne's too busy with that company to notice. The color drained from Vernon's face. Keep listening, I said. It gets better. You think I spent 37 years with that woman for love? I was 25 when my mentor set this up. Mama's hand flew to her mouth. Vernon stumbled backward, knocking over his chair. Who are you? He stammered. You weren't home. You left. I heard you leave. I came back for my security badge. I stepped closer. And then I heard everything. Everything, Daryl. He flinched at the name. That's not... Daryl Eugene Watts. Born 1963 in Detroit. Arrested for check fraud in 1981, did 2 years at Jackson State Prison. Got out, met Clement Briggs, learned the long con. Married Lucinda Chen as Victor Hayes, drained her trust fund. Married Beatrice Okonkwo as Vincent Chambers, stole her settlement money. And then you married me as Vernon Lawrence Hodges and spent 37 years stealing everything I built. Corinne, listen to me. No, my voice was ice. You listen to me. I spent 34 years teaching corporations how to catch predators like you, and you had the audacity to think you could con me. Phyllis emerged from upstairs, followed by the federal agents. Daryl Eugene Watts, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and elder financial exploitation. Vernon, Daryl, whoever he was, made a run for it. He got as far as the front door before 2 more agents intercepted him. They cuffed him right there in Mama's foyer, reading him his rights while he shouted denials and excuses and finally, desperately, apologies. Corinne, please! It wasn't all fake. Some of it was real. The last few years I really did love... Don't. I couldn't even look at him. Don't you dare. They hauled him away, still protesting. Through the window I watched them put him in the back of an unmarked car. Watched the man I'd spent 37 years with disappear down the street. Mama grabbed my hand. Baby. And that's when I broke. 37 years of trust, of love, of partnership, gone. I collapsed into my mother's arms and cried like I hadn't cried since Daddy's funeral. Since the day I'd met the monster who would consume the next 4 decades of my life. I'm sorry, Mama, I sobbed. I brought him into our lives. I let him near you. He almost... Hush. She held me tight. This 96-year-old woman who'd survived everything life threw at her. You saved me. You saved our home. You saved yourself. The next few weeks were a blur. Daryl, I couldn't think of him as Vernon anymore, was denied bail. The evidence was overwhelming. 3 victims, 3 identities, millions stolen. Shayla Kingston was arrested trying to board a plane to Malta with 2 suitcases full of cash. She cracked immediately, testified against Daryl in exchange for a reduced sentence. Harold recovered most of the money. The offshore accounts, the hidden investments, the cash reserves Daryl had been building for his escape, almost everything came back. It turned out he'd been stealing from me for 37 years, but he'd also been hoarding it, too paranoid to spend big until he was safely out of the country. The trial was brutal. I had to sit in that courtroom and listen to the details of how I'd been targeted, groomed, exploited. How Daryl had attended Daddy's funeral specifically to scout for vulnerable women with assets. How he'd researched me, learned my weaknesses, crafted a persona designed to appeal to exactly what I needed at exactly that moment. But I also got to watch Beatrice Okonkwo testify. This strong, elegant woman in her 70s who stood up and told her story, told how Daryl had stolen her accident settlement and left her destitute. I got to meet her afterward, and we cried together, 2 women who'd lost years to the same monster. We survived, Beatrice told me, gripping my hands. That's what matters. We survived, and he didn't win. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge gave him 25 years. At 62, Daryl would be 87 when he got out, if he lived that long. I felt nothing when they read the sentence. Not satisfaction, not vindication, not even relief. Just a vast, empty numbness where 37 years of my life used to be. But slowly, in the months that followed, something else grew in that empty space. Freedom. I sold the mansion, that house Daryl had insisted we buy, that I'd never really loved anyway. Bought a smaller place in West End, closer to Mama. Started attending her church again. Something I'd stopped doing years ago because Daryl always found excuses not to go. Reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with. Women I'd known in college in my early career, before Daryl had slowly, subtly isolated me by always being just a little bit critical of them, just uncomfortable enough around them that it seemed easier not to invite them over. I hired a new CFO for my company and finally took that vacation I'd been putting off for years. Went to Ghana with a tour group, traced my ancestry, stood in places my people had stood centuries ago, cried in a slave castle, and felt something break open inside me, not just grief for what had been stolen from my ancestors, but grief for what had been stolen from me. And slowly, carefully, I started to rebuild. On a Sunday afternoon 6 months after the trial, I was at Mama's house helping her plant flowers in her front garden. The brownstone was safe, would stay in our family, would eventually pass to me and then to my nieces and nephews. Daddy's legacy, preserved. "You seem lighter," Mama observed, patting soil around a rosebush. "I feel lighter." It was true. The anger had faded, leaving something clearer behind. I spent 37 years carrying a lie. Now I'm just carrying myself. That's all you ever needed to carry, baby. A young couple walked past, the woman visibly pregnant, both of them laughing at something. I watched them and felt nothing painful, just hope. Hope that they were real, that their love was real, that not everyone was a lie. "Do you think you'll ever trust anyone again?" Mama asked quietly. I thought about that. About Phyllis, who'd fought for me. About Harold and Amani, who'd helped me fight for myself. About Beatrice, who'd understood. About Teresa, who'd kept my secrets. About the members of Mama's church who'd brought food and prayers and fierce, protective love. "I already do," I said. "Just more carefully now. And I trust myself most of all." That night, I stood on my new porch and looked up at the stars. 72 years old, divorced, rebuilding, relearning who I was without the weight of Daryl's lies. And I realized something. He'd taken 37 years from me. But he hadn't taken everything. He hadn't taken my company, my reputation, my mother's home, my father's legacy. He hadn't taken my strength or my intelligence or my ability to fight back. He'd tried to make me a victim. Instead, he'd reminded me I was a survivor. And in the end, that was the greatest gift, though he never meant to give it. I was free. Finally, completely, undeniably free. And at 72, I was just getting started. 3 months later, I launched a new division at Sentinel Risk Solutions, Elder Fraud Prevention. We partnered with churches, community centers, and senior organizations across the state, teaching elderly people and their families how to spot financial predators. I shared my story, all of it, in workshops and seminars, letting my humiliation become someone else's protection. Mama came to my first presentation, sat in the front row of Mount Zion Baptist Church, and beamed at me as I told a room full of seniors exactly how I'd been conned and exactly how I'd fought back. "That's my daughter," she told everyone afterward. "That's my baby girl." And for the first time in 37 years, I knew exactly who that daughter was. Not Vernon's wife, not a Mark, not a victim, just Corinne Reynolds, CEO, mother's daughter, survivor, and finally, free. That's all for today's story. If this touched your heart, please subscribe and share your own experiences below. We're all in this together.